What happens when a 73-year-old man starts experiencing strange symptoms, and his own family locks him away, calling him delusional? What he discovered behind his shed didn't just change his life, it shook the entire neighborhood. You won't believe how this quiet old man turned the tables on everyone who wrote him off. My name is Henry Mason, and if you think that at 73 life slows down and you finally get to sip your coffee, read the paper, and scratch your back in peace, you're dead wrong. Because one morning, all you want is to do something good, something kind. You bake an apricot pie, drive across town to see your niece, the one your dignified family blacklisted because she married someone they didn't approve of. And instead of gratitude, you get social quarantine. No, really. You offer a bit of kindness, and boom, itching, insomnia, and a family that looks at you like you've gone completely off the rails. Let me walk you through it. It started Friday morning, 4:12 a.m. Don't ask why that specific time. My nerves wake up before I do. I went downstairs, brewed my coffee, and realized I was scratching again. Not just a shoulder shrug. This was the kind of itching that makes you think a colony of fire ants is holding a rave under your skin. Neck, thighs, chest, even the tops of my feet. And this wasn't the first day. But I didn't complain. I'm old school. Unless something falls off, I don't see the doctor. Instead, I focused on the day's mission. Take that damn pie to Claire. Claire is my niece. Sweet, thoughtful, and painfully alone. The family wrote her off because she had a kid with a man who, brace yourself, had tattoos. Imagine that. Not a criminal, not an addict, just ink. I baked the pie, hopped in my rusty but honest Ford, and drove through town. On the porch, her little boy, Mickey, met me. 7 years old. Owl eyes, ears like my old dog Rex. He opened the door, spotted me, and shouted, "Grandpa Henry, you brought the pie?" I swear, I nearly teared up. I've heard plenty of trash in my 73 years. But, Grandpa Henry? That hit me right in the chest. We sat. We talked. She made tea. The kid played in the corner. It felt warm. It felt right. But right doesn't mean safe. When I got home, they were waiting. Joyce, my wife, stood by the sink like I'd just spit in her soup. Next to her, our daughter Stephanie and her cardboard cutout husband Paul. "You went to Claire's?" Joyce asked, not turning around. "I did." "Why?" Stephanie scoffed. "We agreed. You're enabling this embarrassment. You're putting the family in an awkward position. People talk." "People talk?" I laughed. "Who? The neighbor with 3 cats and a police scanner?" "You're slipping," Paul added. "You've been scratching constantly, talking to yourself, not sleeping. We're concerned." "You're not concerned about me. You're concerned about the facade. I don't fit into your curated family image anymore." "Maybe you should speak to someone." "A professional," Paul muttered, looking over his glasses like I was a schoolboy who'd forgotten his homework. Just like that, I was demoted from beloved patriarch to public liability. All for delivering a damn pie. The next day, I visited the clinic. Dr. Wiener, gray-haired, hollow-eyed, and clearly done with life. Itching, age, skin gets dry, insomnia, nerves. I'll write you a cream, maybe a mild antidepressant. You don't think it could be something else? I think you think too much. I walked out with a bag of pills and the sense I'd been erased. Back home? Joyce barely spoke. Stephanie texted me like I was a dementia patient. Even the grandkids stopped dropping by. Apparently, Grandpa had become weird. I was still in my house, but no longer part of it. A few days later, I drove to Claire's again. This time, no one answered. Curtains drawn, I knocked. Silence. And then I saw it. Stephanie and Paul inside yelling. Claire stood protectively in front of her son. I didn't barge in. I left. That night, something snapped. I collapsed in the shower, blacked out, woke up on cold tiles, bleeding. A neighbor heard the crash and called 911. In the hospital, my back looked like it had been through a bar fight. Red, raw, inflamed. The nurse said nothing. Then came a young doctor, tablet in hand, serious face. This isn't age-related. What's happening to you? It's serious. Very serious. We need to run some urgent tests. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel scared. I felt angry. Everyone had written me off, brushed me aside, packaged me into the old and losing it box. But now, something real was surfacing. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolds. They say hospitals smell like bleach and resignation. Mine smelled like something worse. Dismissal. Every nurse that walked past me had the same expression. Here's another one we'll keep overnight and send home with instructions to drink more water. But then came Dr. Reynolds, mid-30s, clipped beard, sharp eyes, and not yet jaded like the rest. He actually looked at me, looked through me, and said, "We're going to figure this out." They drew blood, took skin samples, ran imaging. I was poked more times than a political scandal. Still, I appreciated that someone finally believed I wasn't just scratching because I was bored or old or delusional. Later that evening, I heard them talking outside the curtain. 2 nurses. One said, "Did you see the inflammation around his lymph nodes? It's bizarre, almost like an allergic reaction, but not." The other replied, "He lives with family, right? Maybe stress. You know how seniors get. They internalize things." Seniors. Like I was a club membership, away from being put down. Joyce didn't visit. Stephanie texted once. "Glad you're getting help. Maybe they can adjust your meds." Paul didn't even fake concern. I could have turned into a pile of compost, and he wouldn't blink unless it ruined the grass. Claire, though? She showed up with a bouquet of sunflowers and a note from Mickey. It said, "Get better, Grandpa Henry." "You're my hero." I cried. Not because of the words, but because no one else seemed to remember that I still existed. By day 3, the itching had become fire. My arms were red. My back felt like it was blistering under the skin. And still, all the tests came back inconclusive. Dr. Reynolds looked baffled. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's systemic. Your immune system is responding like it's fighting something, but we can't identify what. It wasn't just my body betraying me. It was reality. And when I returned home, it got worse." Joyce met me at the door with a clipboard. No joke, a literal clipboard. "We need boundaries, Henry," she said, flipping through a pre-printed list. "You'll sleep in the guest room, use separate towels. Your behavior has become unpredictable." I stared at her like she'd grown a third eye. "Are you serious?" "Deadly. Until we figure out what's wrong with you, we have to protect the rest of us." The rest of us. Like I wasn't part of the equation anymore. She had moved my belongings, slippers, books, toothbrush, into a room that hadn't been used since 1996. Even the curtains smelled like exile. At dinner, they whispered at the other end of the table. Paul wore gloves. Stephanie used sanitizer after passing me the salt. I wasn't contagious, but I was inconvenient. The next morning, I tried to go outside for air. The door was locked. Joyce claimed it was for safety. I wasn't safe to be around the neighbors, apparently. "People talk," she said again. "We don't want rumors." So now I was the neighborhood plague. I went back to the clinic. This time, Reynolds looked more serious than ever. Your tests show something environmental, possible toxic exposure. Have you come into contact with mold, chemicals, new medications? I laughed, bitterly. Only thing I've come in contact with is judgment and cold stares. Does that count? He didn't laugh. He just circled something on my chart and said he wanted to run one more series of tests. That night, I overheard Joyce talking to Stephanie again. Same cold tones. Same plotting. He's getting worse. You should see his skin. It's like something's eating him alive. Claire said he tried to come by again, Stephanie replied. Honestly, if he keeps pushing, I'll file for elder guardianship. Elder guardianship. I was still mentally sharp. I filed taxes. I drove. But they were treating me like a faulty toaster to be unplugged and boxed up. I needed to get out. I needed to breathe. I waited until 3 a.m. when the house was asleep and used a butter knife to unlock the side door. I walked barefoot to the backyard, sat on the porch swing, and let the cold slap some clarity into me. My skin burned. My pride ached. But for the first time in days, I felt like myself. Free. Quiet. And then I saw it. Something in the backyard, behind the shed, glinting under the moonlight. I walked over. Slow. Careful. It was a pile of boxes, cardboard, plastic containers, bottles, all labeled with one word: toxic, pesticides, old paint, industrial solvents, stuff that hadn't been disposed of properly, stuff I'd never seen before. That's when I remembered. Paul had taken over the shed last year, said he was cleaning it out, said not to go in there, and now, my skin, my symptoms, the unexplained illness. Something wasn't adding up. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for. Right here. Stay with me to see how I took back control. When the sun rose that morning, I was already outside, barefoot, cold, and holding a half-rusted can labeled flammable. I didn't sleep. Who could sleep after discovering your own family might be poisoning you? Let me say it clearly. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was being paranoid. But there it was, a toxic dump in my backyard, hidden, covered, sealed like a shameful secret. A pile of chemicals capable of burning skin and lungs, and probably half my immune system. I stood there for over an hour, staring at the pile, trying to process, trying not to scream. Paul had taken over the shed a year ago. My new workshop, he called it, just clearing out junk. We all let him, because Paul, with his khakis and smug face, was organized. He was responsible. He knew how to manage things. He also knew I gardened. I planted tomatoes next to that shed. I spent hours out there every week, without gloves, without a clue. So tell me, what kind of man dumps toxins 20 feet from his father-in-law's garden and says nothing? What kind of wife lets him? I didn't need a test to answer that. I needed action. By 9 a.m., I was in the clinic again, holding a photo of the pile. Dr. Reynolds blinked twice, leaned closer, and said, "Where is this?" "My backyard." He went quiet. "This changes everything," he said. "I want environmental health called in immediately. If you were exposed to this, it could explain your symptoms. All of them." He called a number. Started speaking fast, clinical. I watched his face turn pale. Back at home, I printed every photo I took. Put them in a folder. Titled it in red Sharpie. Evidence. Then I sat down at the dinner table. Joyce came in. Froze. "What are you doing?" "Waiting." "For what?" "Answers." Stephanie walked in next. Paul followed, sipping from his hydro flask like he was walking into a board meeting. "I know what you dumped behind the shed," I said. Paul stiffened. Stephanie opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "Number U had your chance to speak. Now it's my turn. I laid out the photos like playing cards. Chemical containers, labels, close-ups. You knew I was sick. You knew the itching, the burning, the insomnia. And you didn't say a word. You locked the door instead. You isolated me. Paul tried to cut in. Now hold on. No, you hold on, I snapped. Because if you speak again, I'll call the local news before I call the EPA. Joyce looked like someone had unplugged her. Silent. Pale. As if she finally saw me. Not the old man losing it, but the man she married and betrayed. You let this happen, I said to her. You helped them treat me like a nuisance, like a mistake. She looked down. No defense, no denial. Dr. Reynolds called that afternoon. The health department had been contacted. They'd be sending a team to investigate. I thanked him. He paused. You were right to push back, he said. Most people your age don't fight. They fade. But you fought. Damn right I did. That night, I moved back into my bedroom. Joyce didn't argue. The next morning, Claire called. She'd heard from Mickey's school counselor that Stephanie had visited again, trying to get access to Mickey's medical records as a concerned relative. That was it. I called a lawyer, asked about protection orders. I wasn't just going to expose the chemical dump. I was going to make sure they couldn't go near Claire or Mickey again. Then came the fire. It wasn't me. It was Paul. 3 nights later, the shed went up in flames. Neighbors called it in. Firefighters arrived, but the chemical smoke was thick. Dangerous. They had to evacuate the whole block. When the investigators showed up, Paul claimed it was an accident. Funny thing about accidents, they usually don't involve soaking wood in lighter fluid first. I handed over my folder. Every photo, every message, every voice memo I'd started recording after that hospital visit. We're not done yet. The final piece of this story will reveal what happened when the truth went public, and how justice showed up wearing gardening gloves. You don't really prepare for the moment your private war becomes public news. I thought justice would feel like a parade. Flags waving, people cheering, someone handing me a plaque that read, "Not crazy after all." But it doesn't happen like that. It starts with the knock. 2 investigators from the Department of Environmental Protection. They showed up at 7:46 a.m. sharp, holding clipboards and determination. They didn't ask many questions. They walked straight to the backyard and looked at the smoldered remains of Paul's accidental fire. One of them knelt, scooped up a handful of soil into a sterile container, and said quietly, "This is criminal." And that's when I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The news broke 2 days later. Local man exposes backyard contamination. Family conflict at center of scandal. They didn't name me outright, but neighbors knew. People who had looked through me at the grocery store were now asking if I was okay. The pharmacist offered to refill my prescription without the usual hassle. Even the barista at Java Joint spelled my name right. It was surreal. Not vindication exactly, but visibility. Joyce stayed quiet. She didn't sleep in the guest room anymore, but she barely said 2 words to me. I think the silence was her apology, or maybe just her defense mechanism crumbling. Stephanie and Paul? They lawyered up. Paul claimed it was all an accident, that he didn't realize the danger, that I was overreacting due to age-related paranoia. That line got him a lawsuit from the health department and a formal investigation from state prosecutors. Meanwhile, Claire finally breathed. She told me, over warm tea on her porch, "For the first time in years, I feel like someone's watching out for me instead of watching me fail." Mickey ran up and gave me a rock he'd painted red and wrote H on. "H for hero," he said. I damn near cried again. The court date came fast, civil trial, environmental damage, emotional distress, negligence. I sat across from Paul in a room that smelled like polished wood and cold revenge. He tried to look casual. I wore my best blazer and a pin Claire had given me that said, "Still kicking." His lawyer talked a lot. Mine talked better. When they called me to the stand, I didn't tell a story. I told my story. The itching, the isolation, the gaslighting, the fire, the garden, the photos. People listened. Some even cried. And when the judge ruled in my favor, I didn't smile. I nodded. Because it wasn't joy, it was justice. And it had been overdue. Paul was fined, required to cover environmental cleanup costs, court-ordered therapy. He lost his job. Joyce's face turned white when she saw the final ruling. Stephanie moved out of state. I heard she took a job in another county. For a fresh start. Good. Claire got custody paperwork that prevented Stephanie from ever making decisions about Mickey again. And me? I got clean soil. The city cleared the backyard. I planted new tomatoes. Built a small bench where the shed used to be. Called it the quiet spot. Dr. Reynolds still calls now and then. Says he uses my story when teaching residents about the dangers of ignoring invisible patients. Sometimes I sit in that quiet spot, holding Mickey's painted rock, and I think about how quickly a life can turn from pie to poison, from silence to fire, from forgotten to fierce. I'm not the man they dismissed. I'm the man who dug deep and found the truth, under the itch, under the silence, under the rot. And now I sleep. If you ever feel like your voice is gone, remember mine. Because sometimes the quietest man in the room is just clearing his throat before changing everything.